بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله النبي الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. So inshallah, the agenda today will be very simple. We'll start off with just a little overview of what a prenuptial agreement actually is. So bismillah. So the very first question, or a very big question, the seminal question is really, what is a prenuptial agreement and why are they so important? I'm sure that either through our Nikah Masterclass, our Instagram page, or from other places, we've heard of this term prenuptial agreement. And so really a prenuptial agreement, just kind of breaking it down, is just an agreement before the marriage that deals with the marriage and what happens to that marriage if it were to fail. If you were to go through a divorce, what would happen to your assets, to your money, to your property? So that's the purpose of a prenuptial agreement. Okay. And these agreements are very special. They're not like any other type of agreement that you come across. For example, in a prenuptial agreement, you have to have, or you should have, certain requirements to make that prenuptial agreement very strong and to make it valid, inshallah. So, for example, in order to have a valid prenup, you should have attorneys on both sides. You should have a full financial disclosure. And you need to make sure that there's no duress, right? That no one is forcing you to enter into this agreement. And so the state, or each state, whatever state you live in, they have different rules surrounding a prenuptial agreement and certain requirements. So these three factors that I'm mentioning, it might be more strict in certain states. It may not be as strict in certain other states. So basically you have to look to your own state to figure out, what do I need? But generally speaking, these are the three things that a state is going to look at to see if this type of agreement is enforceable. Now, typically these prenuptial agreements are signed by, the rich and famous. But us as Muslims, we have a very big need for these types of agreements. A nikah in specific is a type of contract, right? We don't have this union theory of marriage. Rather, we have a contract-based theory of marriage. And so having a prenuptial agreement is part and parcel of how an Islamic marriage should work. You should agree up front on how things are going to operate in the marriage, but also at the end of the marriage. So a prenuptial agreement, in my opinion, should really cover 2 to 3 basic topics. Topic number 1 should be marital property. Okay, so this needs to be part of a prenuptial agreement. What do I mean by marital property? So marital property, and if you've seen our videos, you probably know this already, but marital property is any property that you acquire from the date of marriage to the date of divorce. And it doesn't matter whose name it's in. It doesn't matter if only one of you earned it. It doesn't matter anything, whether you started the business, whether it's your retirement account. What they look at is timing, right? After the point of marriage, anything acquired becomes both of yours, right? And if you divorce, then that gets divided. So people are in a very big surprise, especially when you have, let's say a situation where you have a husband working full time and a wife who is a homemaker. In that situation, people are shocked that, okay, this property that was acquired during the marriage is going to be divided. Well, a prenuptial agreement can help you fashion the definition of marital property the way that you want. So the Islamic default is there's no such thing as marital property. The Islamic default is whatever the wife earns is her money, whatever the husband earns is her money. The default under American law is different. The default under American law is that once you get married, the property belongs to the both of you. So what you need to do in a prenuptial agreement is to decide which paradigm are you going to operate under. Okay, are you going to use the Islamic default? Are you going to use the Illinois default? Are you going to come up with some creative solution for you to define what marital property is? And the beauty of Islam is that it allows you to have flexibility in what you define as marital property. So there's a misconception out there that the people who are talking about prenuptial agreements, they're only talking about getting rid of marital property. That's not true. What we're advocating for is to have an agreement and understand and agree upfront what should happen to property upon a divorce, whether that is you consider it to be joint property, whether you consider it to be separate property. The point is figure it out upfront so that you don't have to worry about it at the end. So that's the first part of a prenuptial agreement, is defining marital property. The second aspect of prenuptial agreement that every prenuptial agreement should address, okay, is going to be alimony or maintenance. Okay. And again, I'm sure we've heard many fatawa and many scholars talking about alimony and maintenance, whether it's haram or halal. Like that's not my discussion today. My discussion today, and what the purpose of a prenuptial agreement is, again, for you and your husband or you and your wife to figure out what should happen if we divorce. Is it going to be something like, for each year of marriage, you know, $5,000? Or if I for example, if I sacrifice my career to stay at home with the kids, and my income is reduced by 30%, for example, in that situation, will there be alimony? Will there be maintenance? Right. So again, the whole purpose of a prenuptial agreement is to decide what happens to alimony, to marital property at the time of divorce. In whatever you can agree to, as long as there is no gharar, meaning that there is no ambiguity in the way that you are fashioning this contract, Islamically, you can agree to pretty much whatever you want to agree to, whether that is 50-50 property, like I said, or whether you're going to have maintenance as a function of income and length of marriage. That's really up to you. And third and finally, what I would recommend that you have in a prenuptial agreement is going to be some terminology or some terms and provisions related to mahr. The problem is that these nikah contracts that we sign at the masjid are not enforceable in courts. That little one-page paper that your imam makes you sign, that's not going to hold any weight. And so in order for sisters, especially, if you want your mahr to be enforced in court, you need a prenuptial agreement. There's really no other way around it. And so those are the three things. These three reasons: definition of marital property, how is alimony or how are payments post-divorce going to work? And number three is mahr. These three things need to be in a prenuptial agreement. And the nikah masterclass, we go into we have an 8-hour course where we go into all the different terminologies and Islamic view of marriage and legal view of marriage and divorce. So, I'd really encourage you to, inshallah, participate in the nikah masterclass to learn a little bit more about prenuptial agreements. But inshallah, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to take some questions that we got earlier today. And then inshallah, towards the end, we will open it up for questions in the comments. But for right now, inshallah, I just want to go through some of the questions that we got on our IG live page. So the first question is, when to start talking about prenuptial agreements in the courting process? Okay, so prenuptial agreements are a taboo, right? And we're still immature in their community when it comes to talking about marriage in this fashion, right? What we are seeing is that people are shying away from it. They believe that this is something that's not Islamic. This is something that's unnecessary. So I think that first and foremost, these types of classes, these types of events, inshallah, will make prenups more common. And I've actually seen that in my own practice. But really, I think that it should be brought up pretty early on. I think once you're serious, once that you start talking about mahr, is really when you should start talking about a prenuptial agreement. And what we've done with the masterclass is something that you can do is that once you believe that you're ready to marry somebody, you really should go through some type of premarital counseling. You should really take some type of education. So maybe what you can do is take the nikah masterclass or some other class together, so both of you learn about the pros and cons of getting a prenuptial agreement. So yes, you can ask questions in the chat and we'll get to them inshallah towards the end. So that was the first question. When should you start talking about it? As soon as you talk about mahr, that's when you should start talking about a prenuptial agreement. So the next question is, what topics suggested by either party should be considered questionable, troublesome, red flags? I don't think that really any questions or any, terms or suggestions should necessarily be considered a red flag. I think that it's really dependent on what you want out of marriage. Do you envision marriage where, your money is your money, his money is his money, or her money is her money? Do you both have careers? Are you both working? What is the plan when it comes to kids? So all of this is kind of an interrelated discussion. And I don't think really anything should be left on the table. I think the red flags are really personal and subjective to what you are looking for. If I'm a guy and I say that I believe that there shouldn't be anything considered marital property unless we put both of our names on it. Unless we both agree that both of our names are going to go onto this house, that's what I'm going to consider marital property. Anything that's in my account is mine. Anything in your account is yours. I don't see that as a red flag. I don't see the other way saying that, hey, everything that we had before the marriage, I keep. Everything you had before the marriage, you keep. But everything from this point on forward will belong to both of us 50-50. Perfect. So I don't think we should really look at this in terms of red flags. I think that we should look at it as part of the premarital courting process and premarital screening process is these types of terms, because finances are a very big reason for divorce in the Muslim community. The next question is, some parents view a prenup as controversial, taboo, or just not necessary. How to persuade? So again, I think it goes back to education. There's obviously a cultural implication when it comes to prenuptial agreements. Again, I pray that the tide is turning as it relates to prenuptial agreements becoming common in our community. But again, I think when it comes to our parents, it's educating them and showing them examples. And I'm sure we all have an example of some nasty divorce, right, that we have come across. And with the divorce rates at where they are, you're more likely to get a divorce than you are to get into a car accident. And so it's just a matter of being safe. It's a matter of thinking things through. It's a matter of realizing that this marriage is a practical union, more so, or on top of also being a romantic um, type of a union. So I think it really puts marriage into a perspective. If we could show that to our parents, I think they will be behind us. There have been a lot of cases that I have where the parents are the ones who are initiating getting a prenuptial agreement, especially when parents themselves are about to, if they were going to pass away and now their kids are going to inherit, are you going to be bequesting your property to your kids? You as a parent would want to make sure that your child does have a prenuptial agreement. Okay, the next question is how to tell someone I know that is getting married why this stuff is important for them to know. Well, you should tell them to jump on this live right now, check out our channel, check out the questions that we've answered, take the Nikah Masterclass. Education. That's the only way that someone's going to realize what happens in this country when you get married. What are the implications of marriage in this country, and what happens if you divorce? And again, my whole stance on this is that my problem is not knowing what you're getting into, and then at the time of divorce being surprised. I think that the education negotiation needs to go up front, and this will then, inshallah, not make our divorces so crazy and so violent and expensive, inshallah. Next question is, what are the must-have items that should be included in a prenuptial agreement? So we covered this already in the beginning. You need a provision on marital property. You need a provision on Mahr, and you need a provision on alimony. These three things should be part of every single prenuptial agreement that you get into or that you create. The next question is, how do I protect my assets as a woman? So protecting assets as a woman, this is a great point, right? Islamically speaking, the woman's money is the woman's money, right? She doesn't have to spend it on the family. The money's for herself. But the reality is that if you get married under Illinois law or any law of any states in America, both parties' money after the point of marriage belongs to both of them. So theoretically, all of the wife's money, all of her savings, all of her retirement account, same with the husband's, all gets put into one pot and it gets divided. So what you need to do as a woman, and I think that's another misconception, that people think that prenuptial agreements are only for men. And I don't understand that perspective. What world do we live in? Majority of Muslim sisters are working. Majority of Muslim sisters are earning fantastic money, maybe more so than their husbands. So what we're talking about here is also protecting women's assets, protecting our sisters' assets, making sure that men aren't getting 50% of their wives' money, not getting alimony payments from their wife. So a prenuptial agreement, again, can outline your property as a woman and make sure that in case of a divorce, that this does not get divided. It does not get put into the equation of what is marital property. The next question is what to discuss as it relates to finances, prenup, mahr, joint accounts, etc., etc. Yeah, these are all of these things should be discussed. Your finances must be discussed. As I said, that really, this is an economic institution. It's a practical institution. You have to run a household together. You have to raise kids together. You have to buy a house and pay for utilities. It's a financial arrangement, right? You're getting certain tax benefits. You're able to pool your money and save, on rent. I mean, there's so many financial benefits of marriage, and there's so many financial implications upon divorce when it relates to getting married. So I would discuss what happens after we divorce. You should discuss who pays the bills. You should discuss what, how are we going to save? What are our savings goals? This thing about my money is my money, and your money is my money. Obviously, that's not a correct statement, but we don't have to. We don't have to necessarily abide by any particular template. We don't have to abide by that. Maybe we do agree that everything goes together. I mean, when I was married, for example, I was still before law school. I didn't even attend law school at that point. So my situation might be very different than, let's say, somebody who's been working for 10 years and then they get married. Their idea of marital property might be very different. So your spending habits, your saving goals, whether you're cheap, whether you like to spend on people, what type of gifts you buy, all of these things should be part of the discussion when you're getting married. The next question is a prenup possible after marriage or is done or something while in marriage? So yes, instead of getting a prenuptial agreement, which means signing prior to the marriage, you can get something called a postnuptial agreement, which is basically the same thing, but you're signing it after the marriage, right? After even people sign postnuptial agreements like 10, 20, 30 years later. You can sign an agreement between you and your spouse at any time before or during the marriage. Even upon divorce, the two of you can agree on how things are getting divided. The problem is that upon divorce, there's so many emotions, so much background that people aren't able to come to a decision or to come to a conclusion. That's why it's so important to talk about it while you're still in love. The last question that I have, and inshallah, we'll take some questions from the audience if there are any, is a lot of people confuse prenup to mention points like child support or child custody. So yes, that's a good point. A prenuptial agreement can only discuss what happens to alimony and property, right? It are money related issues that are not tied to the kids, nor can you discuss child custody. So basically, you cannot discuss anything related to the children. You can't discuss custody, child support. This is a different standard, right? The standard is best interest of the children. So you can't have some type of agreement right now that says that wife is going to have full custody of the children. But then 10 years later, may Allah protect us, wife has some problem or she's addicted to something. I don't know. May Allah protect us all. It doesn't make sense for the judge to apply that prenuptial agreement 10 years later when the circumstances have totally changed. The same is not true, however, for finances. Husband and wife could be broke as a joke when they sign this, and then one of them becomes a millionaire. Arguably, that prenuptial agreement should still stand and will stand, right? So it's very different when it comes to child-related issue as it does to financial-related issues. Inshallah. So that was it when it comes to the questions that were asked today on Instagram. If there are any questions in the chat, feel free to ask the questions. And while the questions come in, if there are any, I just wanted to highlight that the Nikah Masterclass has come out with, or we're still in the beta version, a prenuptial service, right? Inshallah, what we want to do is we want to provide a form and an avenue for husbands and wives or for fiancés and for fiancés to submit their information. And we will then formulate a template and you can take that template to your local attorneys. And the problem that we face is that there's so many lawyers, but there's not many Muslim lawyers who understand, the Islamic terms and terminology. So what we're doing is that we're creating that for you, and then you would take that to your own lawyer and have that reviewed and signed and actually validated. So if you're interested in that prenuptial service, please do DM us on our Nikah Masterclass Instagram. So the question that we have here is it wise to draft a mock prenup if you are not currently in a relationship marriage as a way to give yourself peace of mind, inventory what you have will have? If so, how would one go about doing so? So yes, you can do a mock prenuptial agreement. I think that um, what it comes down to is the one aspect of it will be creating a ledger, right? A ledger or a inventory of all of the property and assets that you have, the liabilities that you have. So maybe you can start um like a Word document and outline all the accounts that you have, the retirement accounts that you have, the houses, the businesses, the debts and liabilities, that type of thing. And then maybe the second part of that exercise is thinking about what would you want for marital property? What should that look like? What should alimony look like? What should Mahr look like? So yes, I think that'd be a very interesting exercise, but also along with the rest of the compatibility aspects of getting married. So the question is, do we submit questions here, or is there a link? No, please, you can submit a comment, and we can go through those questions, inshallah. We'll stay on for another 10, 15 minutes, inshallah, if there's any questions. But like I said, inshallah, we will be having the next cohort of the Nikah Masterclass in October. So look out for that, inshallah. We are offering piece by piece videos of the conference that we just held a few weeks ago. Alhamdulillah, we had many great speakers. Imam Rashad, we had a sister talk about financial planning. We had Mahr negotiation class. So if you go to the Nikah Masterclass, you can check out those videos. And like I said, we are launching the prenuptial service for Muslims so that you can have Islamic prenup in whatever state that you live in, inshallah. So if there's any other questions as it relates to Islamic prenups, any myths or misconceptions that anybody has or has heard of, I would love to discuss that. All right. So we have a question. What if the potential partner does not feel comfortable with a prenuptial agreement? So I think this goes to what you're comfortable with. What do you want to see happen? If this is a deal breaker for you that they're not going to enter into a prenuptial agreement, that might be something you walk away with. But I think for the most part, most people are not comfortable with prenuptial agreements because they don't understand what it is and what terms you can have in it. People seem to think that a prenuptial agreement basically leaves one of them dry, and without any money and nothing to survive on. But that's not necessarily the case. A prenuptial agreement could still say that divide your property 50-50 and still say that there's still some type of maintenance payments after the marriage, as long as the two of you agree. Maybe what you want to do is you just want to protect one business of yours. Maybe you want to protect just one property of yours. So you could be very flexible. It's not a all or nothing proposition when it comes to prenuptial agreement. So to answer your question, I would say that try education. We send them something to read. But at the end of the day, you really have to ask yourself, is this a deal breaker for me? Jazakallah khair for the question. So I'm looking to see if there was any other questions that were submitted on the Instagram. Again, feel free if you do have any questions. Yeah, the biggest misconception, I think, again, is that somehow prenuptial agreements are there as an attack on one gender against the other gender. That's absolutely not true. I think that a prenuptial agreement can be conformed and molded into something that works for the husband and for the wife. Whether one of you makes a lot of money, whether one of you makes little money, I think that this is a great way for couples to discuss what should actually happen. And I think it will make divorces better. It will make divorces less nasty, less expensive. And actually what it could do is take away the financial incentive of getting divorced. Rather than making divorce a financial decision, divorce then becomes a practical decision. So there's a question, where did the phrase her money is hers, his is hers come from? I really don't know, because it's really not true. It's really not true. Um, the way it really works is that, yes, the wife's money is the wife's money. The husband's money is the husband's money. But the husband has a responsibility to provide from his income for the support of the wife. So that would be, for example, the housing, clothing, food, and really what the cultural norms are. So it's not necessarily that all of the money that the man earns becomes the wife's. Rather, she has a claim if he's not supporting her financially when it comes to, like I said, housing, clothing, fooding, and the other necessities of life. So that's a good question. I think it is a big misconception as what that phrase actually means. So as we're wrapping up, we are taking questions in the comments. So if you have any questions about Islamic prenups or prenuptial agreements, any misconceptions, please let us know, inshallah. If you can't think of any questions now, or you have questions in the future, you can always message us on Instagram. As you see on our page, we try to answer as many questions as we can. So we have a question. I live in Sydney, Australia, and we call it financial binding agreement. 20 years marriage, now going through divorce, and we never did the prenup. And now he's saying I don't get anything as that's haram and not my haqq. Yeah, and that's the problem. And that's exactly what we want to avoid. And again, I know we can't necessarily fix the situation, but what we're trying to say is that for people who may face something like this in the future, having a prenuptial agreement takes away this entire argument of, oh, this is haram and you're not allowed this money, you're not allowed that money. There's many arguments that someone can make around this particular statement, but if you have a prenuptial agreement, it closes all the doors. It closes all the doors to say that in the prenuptial agreement, what is marital property going to look like? What is alimony going to look like? And whatever you agree to will be Islamic. We have the freedom of contract under Islamic law, and a prenuptial agreement can be molded in whatever way you want to accomplish that, inshallah. So I have a question here. What's the best way to get a prenup in Houston? Just booking a consultation with a Muslim attorney. Yes, that would be the best way to get a prenuptial agreement, is to talk to a Muslim lawyer, talk to them about what your goals are in the three topics that we've been talking about: marital property, Mahr, and maintenance, and propose that to your lawyer. Let the lawyer talk to you about the pros and cons of what your vision and proposal is. That lawyer then will help you write that contract, that proposed prenuptial agreement, and then you can present that to your husband's lawyer for review and comment, and hopefully, you go back and forth. And so the sister's comment, now I'm left with nothing. I mean, again, I think that's the problem. Islamically speaking, there is supposed to be payment of the mahr. You're supposed to have payment of maintenance for a number of months. The Quran even talks about giving a gift upon divorce. SubhanAllah, what kind of society we live in, where divorce has become so bitter and so harsh that people are there to ruin each other, where the Quranic way of divorce is actually to give your wife a gift at the time of divorce. SubhanAllah, may Allah protect us and allow our community to learn about and to enter into these agreements so that we can actually understand what happens to our property, God forbid, if there was, or based on Allah's plan, if there is a divorce or a dissolution of our marriage. So the question is, if I take action through family court, is that haram? Because that is what he is claiming. Again, I can't necessarily answer fiqh questions. But that's the thing. There are two separate tracks. We have two separate tracks. We have the Islamic way of divorce and we have the legal way of divorce. The Western court systems have a very different view of marriage and divorce and marital property compared to that of Islam. So inshallah, if there's any general questions, I'm more than happy to ask, inshallah. So there's a question here. I know a couple who bought a house together and signed the deed, but because his dad gave him the money after divorce, the dad took the house away. Get a prenup for safety. There you go. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, and there's so many crazy things that can happen in a divorce, and the problem is a lot of times we're going to spend so much money trying to figure out how this property should be divided and whose money is whose and who has a claim and what loans are there and what debts are there, where a prenuptial agreement can identify each and every property that you have right now and also have general rules about what's going to happen to the property that you acquire through the marriage. So, inshallah, just a few minutes left. If there's any final questions, any final thoughts, uh, please feel free to comment. Please share the Nikah Masterclass Instagram page with your friends. If you ever come across question and answer that you find helpful, please do share that. We really want to spread the word on marriage in Islam, marriage under American law, divorce under Islam and American law, and how we as Muslims can inculcate our own view of protecting family and our own view of what marriage and divorce should look like. So we have a question. How do you go about bringing up the idea of a prenup? Should you talk about your properties, assets before getting a lawyer involved? So I think we talked about this a little bit earlier. I think you talk about bringing up a prenup when you start talking about Mahr in your courting process. Like once the two of you find that you are compatible with each other as it relates to values, Islam, culture, education, age, all those different things. And now you found compatibility. The next stage is going to be financial compatibility, because that's again a very important aspect of marriage. And so at the time of Mahr is when I would bring up nuptial agreement and what is your view on it? What are your thoughts on it? What do you think? Should we have one? Should you not have one? And bringing it up more generally, right? You don't have to say, "Hey, I want a prenup, or else we're not going to get married." I think you could bring it up by just getting their thoughts on prenuptial agreements. I think that honestly, you should actually talk about divorce. I know it sounds so unromantic, but you should really talk about divorce and how you view divorce during the courting process. Should you talk about your properties and assets before getting a lawyer involved? I think as part of the courting process, that could be something that you bring up. But yes, when you're doing a prenuptial agreement with a lawyer, you are going to have a full financial disclosure that's going to be exchanged. So if it's awkward for whatever reason to discuss that, the lawyers will um, gather all that information and exchange that information with the other lawyer. So it doesn't have to be, I guess I don't have a recommendation whether that's before or during, but either way, when the lawyers do get involved, you're going to have to do the property and asset disclosure one way or another, inshallah. Inshallah, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Jazakumullahu khairan to all of you for tuning in. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your participation. Please follow us on Instagram. Share our page with those that may benefit. So, Jazakumullahu khair for everybody. Inshallah, we'll try to have these more often. And if you have any comments, questions, any topic suggestions, please do DM us on the Nikah Masterclass Instagram.